physically abuse you. You feel helpless and weak. You didn't do any of the crimes that you were accused of. But who is there to listen to you? Who is there to care for your voice, to care for your dignity? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Farisha, and today I'll be talking about why we must treat people suspected of a crime with dignity. For ease of reference, I've structured my speech today to be grounded upon two key issues. First, to uphold the presumption of innocence, and second, because the people never forget. Now, on to my first point. 3 years ago, when I decided to commit myself to the pursuing of the legal field, one of the most common and earliest questions that I usually got was this: aren't you scared that you'd be defending a man who, God forbid, committed murder or who is guilty? Now, honestly, I didn't really know the answer to this question 3 years ago. But I'll tell you now that after years of really thinking about it, I finally understood the notion of no man is guilty until and unless he is proven so. In Malaysia, in the court of law, the doctrine of presumption of innocence sees that a person is given the right to a fair trial, and his guilt will be determined based on evidence admitted to the court. Still, 4 to 8% of convicted criminals were wrongfully convicted of their accused crimes. So here, ladies and gentlemen, if even the convicted criminals have even a shred of possibility of being innocent, what about the people who are simply detained under custody? This is why it's important that all detainees are treated with dignity, because they very much may be dignified. Unless and until we are truly given the confirmation of guilt, who are we, who are you and I, to decide on a man's innocence or lack thereof? You and I, we all live and walk through our day-to-day lives because we have the comfort of dignity, because we have the comfort of being respected by every member of the society. But imagine having that stripped away from you in a split second, and imagine having to bear that for the rest of your life. Imagine being disrespected wherever you go, and imagine being beaten to bits and have nobody stand up for you. If an innocent man under custody can be subject to this, then truly, ladies and gentlemen, we are all subject to this. Because really, we are all the innocent man. In the end, this leaves a lasting impact on all of us. Because who's to say that it won't happen to you? If it happened to me, and if it happened to other innocent men. This brings me to my second point. The people never forget. Torturing a person and dismissing their dignity leaves a permanent impact on the people, because we will never forget. The physical and psychological harm inflicted onto persons subject to torture will last forever for both the victims and the families. And for this, let's imagine a scenario. Imagine a man. It can be any man at all, the kindest man that you've ever met in your whole life. It could be your friend, a man that you just met last night, your favorite barista. For me, probably it's simpler. I'd imagine my own father. Imagine that one day he stands up against an injustice, say, for example, a bully that he sees in front of his eyes. Imagine that because of this, he was arrested and he was tortured, stripped off of every last shred of dignity that he has left. Imagine that he's labeled an extremist for fighting against a system, albeit the system is unjust. Ladies and gentlemen, this story might ring a few bells for some of us here. Because indeed, from 1964 to 1982, this was reality for Mr. Nelson Mandela, a man who was accused of terrorism simply for fighting against apartheid in his beloved South Africa. Today, we remember him as a humanitarian. Today, we remember the people on the bad side of history who detained him and his fellow inmates while they were fighting for the freedom of South Africa. Today, we remember their sadness, we remember their sorrow. still feel their pain. And we still see it happen again in Palestine, with detainees being stripped off of their clothing and humiliated in public, not to mention torture. And yet again, we are transported back in time, back to Robben Island with the liberators of South Africa. My point, ladies and gentlemen, is that we will never forget. We will never forget Mandela, Sobukwe, Pokela, Mlambo, and we will far from forget the Palestinians and all other people subject to torture who had their dignity shred from them. And why should we forget when remembrance is the forefront of hindrance from the repetition of history? But all hope is not lost, ladies and gentlemen. Despite this, there's always hope for a better future. We can advocate for more humane treatment towards detainees in order to preserve their dignity and preserve justice. We can set the standard that human dignity is a non-negotiable value. We can decide to uphold the people's right to dignity under all circumstances. We can be part of the conversation. We can stand up and say, stop. No more torture. It's affecting both you and me. And although you might not think it's important, to that man trembling with red and blue all over his body, your voice means hope for him. Let me leave you with something to ponder upon before I go. For you to ensure your rights, you must ensure the rights of the man next to you. After all, you are only free if I am free. Thank you.